What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. Podcast War Room recording session. Pod first, pre-combine week, CR, the whole gang getting ready to head out to Indy. How we doing? How we feeling? How many years in a row have you gone now?
Oh, that's a good question. It's been
Grizzled veteran at this point.
I really am. I think this is, I want to say 6. You have the weird, obviously, pandemic year smack in the middle of all this. So, that is obviously an outlier. But yeah, Combine actually, I've done Senior Bowl for, I think, 10. Combine, I started to go probably about 6 years ago. I always say it's my favorite event out of like the big 3 events this time of year. I always go Senior Bowl, Super Bowl, Combine. Combine is far and away my favorite. It's not just the player access, but the coach and GM access. Actually, the Jets will have a coach and GM that decide to go this year, which is very nice start.
We did it.
Yeah, very small steps. So that'll be nice to be at their podiums. And yeah, the Combine is great because you have this weird balance of during the day, and they have changed the schedule in recent years where the teams are doing so much at night. It's not as what it once was, where everybody was out together at night, because it's become more of a primetime TV event. I say back in the day, this wasn't that long ago, but when I started going, you'd like all the workouts and all that stuff would be done early enough that you went out with all your friends that also work for teams, dinners, drinks, all that stuff. If you want to do that now, you're getting into like the real wee hours of the night, deep into the night. And for media people like myself, we start on set at 7:30, 8 in the morning. So that aspect has changed a little bit, where it's not, 4 or 5 nights of mayhem. You might pick your spots where you see your people, but it's a really good event. There's so much going on during the day, and then obviously a lot of stuff behind closed doors at night, where I've told the story on this podcast. Like, I've sat in on a trade that 2 teams have made, which is really, really cool. It's just everything goes down there. And it's, obviously the new league year hasn't started, but everybody's talking about contracts, trades, and all this stuff at the Combine.
Yeah, as an outsider, I always like this week because the volume of rumors, chatter starts picking up because everyone's together, everyone's drinking a little bit, everyone's talking, everyone's yapping, and all of a sudden you feel like things start to move a little bit. And is this extension going to start getting worked on? Is this trade going to start getting hashed out? We start to get a sense of where certain negotiations could be headed and what players the Jets may or may not be interested in. And you kind of have that week in between, and then it's league year. And that week is always insane here when the free agent signings either aren't coming in fast enough or they start coming in fast and furious. And it's not just for the Jets. That's, it's the same for everybody. But when you're dealing with a year 1 of a new regime, it's a little less predictable. Like, we got by year 6, you kind of had a feel for like how the Joe Douglas process would play out. We have really no idea what like year 1, week 1 league year is going to look like for Muji and Glenn.
No.
Maybe we start getting some rumblings. They're going to be there. They're going to do press conferences. They're going to be at the podium. You guys are going to be there, which is awesome. I think we're going to have 4 of us down there, which is great.
It's an all-time high.
It's an all-time high. Eventually, we're going to be like 10 deep down there.
Yeah.
What I want to do with the pod is I want to start concentrating in on free agency and the veteran market and the current roster. We're starting to build the free agency board, which we release every year. So I'm really like combing through all the names that, Dan has kind of mapped out for myself, Will, and anyone else who's going to contribute to it, just to start like mentally rank who's actually out there, while having the knowledge that a lot of the guys that you get particularly excited about never even make it to the market. They get franchise tagged, they re-sign with their teams, and you always end up kind of having to dig a little bit, but still you get a bit of a feel. And then on War Room, we'll answer some more inside baseball draft questions that we've got stacking up in the Discord, because the draft also isn't that far away. And of course, the scouting combine is about the NFL draft, and that's going to come up very fast. I know you guys are already off and running on the draft guide, and it's going to be a hell of a 6 weeks from March 1st up through the end of the draft, with the live show smack dab in the middle. So again, another week where deep breath, a couple more episodes of Streets of Fire, but it's not quite completely insane, but that's going to change very soon. So I'm going to start in kind of a random place. And I asked this in our group chat today because I've been thinking about this position a lot, because I feel like it could go a million different directions. And I'm going to talk about linebacker, because I look at the Jets' current linebacker room. It's CJ Mosley, it's Quincy Williams, it's Jamian Sherwood, who's set to be a free agent. I don't know what this room is going to look like at all next year. I wouldn't be shocked if all three of those guys are back. I wouldn't be shocked if none of the three of them were back. In free agency, is this a position that they prioritize heavily? I don't think it's going to be something they look at in the first round of the draft, but certainly could be something they look at in the middle rounds. I want to start with what they have on the roster. Now, my initial gut feeling, and we've talked about this a little bit, is that Mosley's probably done here. I think he will either retire or he won't be on the Jets this season. There's some money savings that will come with that. It feels like it's probably time. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he retired, especially with the injury he's coming off of. We have rumblings that Quincy Williams is going to want a new contract. Is that going to be a hold-in, hold-out situation? Is that much ado about nothing? Is he going to be back? Is he as good of a fit without Robert Saleh? Is he going to be the same kind of player? And then Sherwood, you kind of get mixed bagged of feelings about him. Had a ton of tackles, had some really nice games, also missed a lot of tackles and had some inconsistencies. How much money would he really get on the open market? And did the Jets have a situation where they want to let him walk and create another hole? Or do they have a guy circled like Derek Barnes in free agency that we're just going to go get him day one or day two? He's going to be one of our starting linebackers, and we're going to kind of reboot this group and maybe draft a guy on day 2 or day 3 and kind of start over from there. But let's start with who they have. Mosley, Quincy, Sherwood. What do you think happens with these three guys for the Jets going into 2025?
Obviously, Mosley's the wild card. You look at the contract, which has been a hell of a contract. I mean, there's a lot of void money at the end of it. Pretty low amount of void money, but still. This is one where if you designated him as a post-June cut, and keep in mind, I believe you only have 2 of these, so they're all signs point to them using it on Rodgers. I don't think they have to use it on Rodgers, but all signs point to them using it on Rodgers. If they wanted to do that with Mosley, just per over the cap, you save $4 million this year, and you save $3.1 million the following year, and then you'd have some really very small hits the following 2 years. The classic Joe Douglas void restructuring.
Spread it out for a decade.
It really, there's so many different contracts that look like this. Because if they didn't make him a post-June 1 cut, and this would, Jason obviously would have a really good read on this deal, but I'm just reading it from what they have on their website. They'd be carrying 16 in dead money this year, and they'd actually lose $3.6 million in cap space. So there's a lot going on with Mosley's deal where you have to make him a post-June cut, from my understanding, if you're moving on from him. And maybe you don't, right? Maybe there's a world where they think he's healthy and they ride it out and they want a leader in the middle of that locker room for the first year, that transition year, because the savings just isn't enough for them. We'll see. So Mosley's just the total wild card. Quincy's I would say, the easiest one to figure out when you're just setting the odds, because CJ can go one at 50-50, right? Retire or be back or cut. I don't think he'll if he retires, he's really hurt, CJ. There's a lot we don't know going on there if he retired. With Quincy, he's under contract here for another year. But I've said before, very sneaky, because he was an older prospect and he was a waiver claim from another team where he didn't work out as a draft pick. He's approaching 30 very quietly, Quincy Williams. Let me just double check his birthday. I believe this. So this will be his age 29 season. So the Jets, that deal was actually a great deal. You got him on a 3-year deal. And at the time, it looked like they overpaid him a little because he wasn't fully established yet. And that was a deal they were right on, because he blew up the first year of that deal. He was an all-pro. But it was a perfect deal in a sense that, hey, after his age 29 season, you're a free agent for a linebacker that plays with speed. So I think when it comes down to it, Quincy should want a new deal. You'd rather be negotiating as a 28-year-old. He turns 29 at the end of camp. You'd rather be negotiating at the end of, at now rather than a year from now. But I don't know. We don't know. The Jets don't even probably know. They're probably watching the tape on these guys, getting a feel of how they feel about them. Where is he a guy that you want to pay, beyond age 29? And maybe there's a middle ground there. Can you tack on another year of guaranteed money and he's okay with that? And that year of guaranteed money is pretty big money in the linebacker market. But on the flip side, you save the term where hey, you're going to be a part of this thing for the next 2 years and then you're free to walk and we'll pay you in the second year. We don't know what he's comfortable with, right? And then there's just the world where the Jets are hey, you got to play out your deal. We don't care. And then there's also the world where the Jets look at it, like you said, Joe, and they want new guys in their scheme and they go, we'll just get different guys and we'll trade you while you still have value. I don't think you'd get back the value for the player that Quincy is. So that's the problem with that. Like, you're not going to, if you get a 4th round pick for Quincy, that's not good enough. But how many teams are knocking down the door to trade a day 2 pick for an all pro linebacker that's also due to be paid a lot of money? So my gut feeling is Quincy's on this team next year. Sherwood can also go one of two ways, just because when you look at Sherwood, the Jets don't know if they're going to keep him or not yet, because they don't know what other teams are willing to go to for Sherwood. I think he had a little bit of, the tackles are tackles, right? So those, when you lead the league in tackles, that's always going to be like a little bit inflated. But Sherwood also did play on the right trajectory and got better and showed that he could be a starting linebacker in this league. So I think they don't know what CJ is going to ultimately do, right? Like where he's at health wise, but they probably have a good read on if they'd cut him anyway. I think with Sherwood, they're figuring out what is the market going to dictate. We have a number that we'd go to keep him. And then with Quincy, it's like a situation that you'd prefer to just ride it out, but you got to see how dug in he is in an era that, I know it's crazy to say after what we dealt with Hassan Reddick, guys just don't hold out and end up on the right side of it very much anymore.
Yeah, hopefully he learned from the Reddick situation. And again, if they're going to go external, Barnes is a free agent, Greenlaw is a free agent, Bolton's a free agent. Like, they're free agent linebackers. Yeah. It's just how much money are you spending on the external market there? I mean, Greenlaw, if healthy, is a very interesting name, as is Barnes. But are you making lateral moves? And is it just because you think they're a better fit in your system? Sherwood, I'm curious what the market says, because I think he's one of those players that's heading in the right direction and is okay. But I do think Jet fans probably slightly overrate him a little bit, because I think, there were some nice moments, but there were also a lot of mistakes, and he was kind of part of the problem with their ability to stop the run and how inconsistent they were on defense. So let's see. I think there could be,
don't mean much.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're tackling a guy 7 yards down, and I'm not taking away from his season, I'm just saying, like, that doesn't mean he's getting $18 million a year on the free agent market.
Yeah, I don't think he's that kind of guy. And again, like, do the Jets want to go external and sticking in the middle of the defense? We know safety needs to be rebooted. I don't expect any of these guys to be back and starting, honestly. I think the Tony Adams bubble wrap era is over. Maybe he goes to San Francisco. It's not going to be Chuck Clark. That didn't work here. If Ashton Davis is around, it's probably more of a rotational player. You're going to be like starting fresh here in many ways. So
which is what they want. It's what they want.
It's time. Like, Hufanga is going to be a really popular name. In the kind of energy I think you could see Steve Wilkes wanting to bring over, and maybe kind of a reset back there. Health, if he hits the market, is he hitting the market for a reason? Justin Reed's out there, reliable veteran. Justin Simmons, always there.
There's depth on that market.
Yeah, Javon Holland, likely to hit the market. A bit of a playmaker.
He's an enigma, right?
A bit of an enigma. Like, again, why is he hitting the market? But certainly would be a major upgrade to what the Jets have had. And like you said, there's starters out there, and they have to go get at least one, I think, in free agency. So linebacker,
they don't get paid. Like,
exactly. Like, take advantage of that.
They just don't get paid. They've almost become the equivalent of DHs in baseball, that they just sit out there and then they end up getting this deal where you're like, guy hit 30-something home runs last year, and it's like nobody wants to pay him because they just don't want to deal with the term. They want these mercenaries at that spot. So unless they draft their own guy. So I think there's a world where the Jets sign 2 safeties if the market really sours on the group as a whole. But you're right, Joe. You got to get at least one.
And then, we look at defensive line. Old friend Sheldon Rankins will be available now. Always good to chew up some rotational reps and make Dan happy.
Tough year last year, but there was a lot of health stuff going on.
Super Bowl darling Milton Williams, likely to hit the market. I'm sure he'll be popular because the Jets badly need help in that area. But are you overpaying relative to a hot end to the season, or does he just, does the money end up making sense? Jets need some fat up front. They need to get bigger up front. Yep. And it's not just going to come through the draft. So I would imagine at a minimum, they're going to add one defensive lineman, one safety, and maybe one linebacker. We'll see what happens with corner and how aggressive they get there. I'm, again, more of the mind to pay to the other positions I just spoke about versus paying at corner and letting it ride with Sauce Carter and Eccles and Stiggers and seeing what you could do there. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you're kind of looking through a relatively middling group of pass catchers. To an extent, right? I don't think they're going to be in the T. Higgins or Godwin business. I don't think that's going to happen. But are you sniffing around De'Ami Brown, Darius Slayton, Tim Patrick, some of these guys at receiver, because you need guys to chew up reps around
And it
Garrett
ain't
Wilson.
pretty.
And then at tight end, Juwan Johnson, little athleticism. Do you get him in the mix? These are things you're going to have to attack through free agency and the NFL draft, where, get some bodies and get some pass catchers, because the Jets need guys who could chew up reps. And, Johnson, Slayton, De'Ami Brown got a little interesting upside. Like, these guys can play and they can make plays and like take up reps, but that's not enough. You're still going to have to go address this stuff in the NFL draft. But if I'm a Jet fan, I'm not getting my hopes up on like, we're going to go get Chris Godwin or T. Higgins. I don't think that's likely to happen. You could dig a little deeper and say, can we squeeze a year out of Keenan Allen? Or is that ship like fully sailed? He can't stay healthy. Are we going to try to make some other like proactive veteran move and make some calls to teams that are overly stuffed at receiver, like Seattle with DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett? Is there another team that might be a little heavy there and you think you could get some value? They're going to have to be creative and do some of that shopping, I think, because if you're just counting on, the free agency list, it's not, particularly loaded up. Doesn't mean you can't find guys who could chew up reps, but you got to be better with these second and third tier signings and getting value from them. And they've shown an ability to do this in limited pockets. Like, you have to hit your John Simpson and DJ Reed signings and have more of those and less of the Brashad Perryman, Jared Davis, Javon Kinlaw, guys where like you're paying them meaningful money to pay meaningful reps and they can't do anything for you. So it's not like completely barren. Like, these guys, they're not terrible, but you got to just pick the right one. And I know that's easier said than done. So like, you could be looking at Slayton or Patrick. You might say, well, like, they each have pros and cons. They can't stay healthy, but Patrick has some experience in the system. You got to pick the guy who could go get 55 catches and 625 yards for you next year, working off of Garrett and Tet or whatever. But are there other names and other positions that you're particularly intrigued by? Do you think the Jets are going to silo their shopping? Not silo, but index heavily in shopping around the Lions and 49ers roster in particular?